I've got the battery charging right now, but I wanted to show a couple of the wiring things that I got figured out. So I have here, you can see the headlight bucket assembled. It's not screwed in yet. There's still some things that I need to adjust, but first time that I've seen the bike without the headlight bucket spewing all those wires. When you turn on the ignition, you get your neutral indicator light, and I'll show you how to take it out of gear, and it goes away. Put it back into gear. Put it back into neutral, and the indicator light comes on. I've got headlight on, tail light on. Then this seems to be backwards at the moment. When I take it off high beam, when I go to low beam, the high beam light comes on. And when I go to high beam, the high beam light comes off. You can see them. This is low, this is high. But when it's high, the light is off. When it's low, the light is on. Anyway, I'm sure that's easy enough to figure out. I still am waiting for the relay flasher for the turn signals. So hopefully, once I have that installed, that'll work. The brake light here, when it's running and then I pull the brake lever, it only becomes slightly brighter. I don't know what I can do to make that a bit more differentiated between when the brake light is on and when it's just the regular running light. Here's a few of the small parts that I'm working on. This is the helmet holder. I took apart the internals so that I could sand it down as best as I could, and I'm going to go ahead and just spray paint this. Then this is the turn signal indicator. I'm also going to take the paint off and probably just spray paint since it's such a small part, although I may powder coat it if I decide to powder coat a number of these pieces at once. I do need to get the 12-volt bulb for this. I think it's the same as the ones that I put into the speedometer, but the package that I bought only came with 3, so I need to see if I can't just source a single one. I added a simple inline fuel filter. It was kind of difficult to find a 3/16 inch fuel filter, but this was something that I picked up on Amazon for $6 or $7. I've got the bike back apart. As I work through some stability issues, I found that when I'm going over about 30 miles an hour, the steering gets kind of weird, and I think it has to do with the way that I installed these cups and the races in the cups. So at least for this setup, and actually I assume for most based on the way the cups are sized, the front has one size cup, the top has one size cup, and there's a different size for the bottom cup. For one, I don't, and it's difficult because when I took it apart, I'm not sure, but I think I had one of these races in backwards, which caused a spacing issue. And then the other more prominent problem had to do with the bottom race. Here was set up such that, this one here was set up that it was actually getting stuck on the steering column or the steering post and wasn't going down far enough to mate with the bearing in the bottom race. So I think what was happening is that the bottom race here was actually what was spinning against the bottom of the frame and not against the bearing. So I think something weird might have been happening where when weight went forward and puts pressure on the suspension, it wouldn't let it steer correctly, and I'm hoping that that's actually my problem. So I've got actually just sanded down this main column just slightly enough that I can now move this race all the way down so that it's flush with the bearing and the bearing housing here. And also greased up the bearings really well. I actually neglected to pack them with grease before I put them on, and that may also have been part of my problem. So I'm going to try to get the bike back together now that I have this pushed down as far as it goes without binding and packed with grease. And we'll see if that fixes my suspension problem. But one thing that I did want to point out is this new kickstand that I got. It actually does fit, and it does have clearance for. It's able to come up high enough that it doesn't touch the brake arm until the brake arm is about level with the foot peg. So I do have enough travel now to be able to pull the rear brake arm. The new problem that I've realized though is that my old brake arm with the 2-inch extended swing arm isn't long enough to reach the hub any longer. So I need to find a way to make this brake arm 2 inches longer. So I'm going to head to the Ace Hardware and see if I can't find some type of solution for that. But back to the kickstand that keeps it nice and centered. It's neat because I can actually pull off the front fork, work on it, and have the bike balanced here without having to get the jack out and do other awkward things to keep it balanced while I'm doing work on the front part of the bike. My current lever solution is kind of janky. I got the hydraulic brake setup from the Fat MX fork system, but I couldn't find, and they didn't sell, a matching clutch lever. So this was something that I picked up for cheap on eBay to hold me over so that I could get the controls figured out. But it's a different color. It's a polished aluminum instead of this satin aluminum, and the rear view mirror threading is also different between the two. So I'm going to install a separate set of matching clutch and brake levers that can leverage obviously the hydraulic front brakes from the Fat MX fork system, but that then has a higher end clutch assembly to match it. I went and filled the new brake lever with .3 brake fluid and bled the system here at the caliper. But these are the new levers. They both match in style, obviously, unlike the other ones that I had. This also has a much longer travel for the clutch. So a problem that I was having with the other clutch lever that I had was that when I fully pulled it back, it wasn't fully disengaging the clutch. When the engine was on, it wasn't allowing me to go into neutral. I'd have to turn the engine off and then flip to neutral. But now with this longer pull, I'm able to fully disengage the clutch and put the engine into neutral without turning off the engine. So here's my completed solution for the rear brake and brake arm. And it's just about as close as I can get as far as pushing as hard as I can go, moving this rear brake as far as it needs to stop the rear wheel with as much travel as I have. I would assume actually normally this probably has more travel. With the 2-inch extension, the regular bar was supposed to work, but I needed about another inch of threads to connect it with this particular setup. So what I did here, I have a coupler. I think it's M8 by 1.0 or M6 by 1.0, I can't remember. Connecting just a bolt that I cut the head off and have then lengthened with the coupler, and I have a jam nut here to hold it all in place. It's hard to see, but I have just a small part of spring that I cut off from the initial spring so that there's the smallest amount of play there to keep this brake arm positioned backwards. And then I have the original nut on the end to hold this all together. But in the end, everything works. As I pull this down, it articulates the arm and brings the brake as far as it'll go. Now, I don't imagine that this rear brake is going to have too much power. The front disc brakes are going to be providing most of it, but this was something that just needed to get finished to have the whole assembly complete. But I'm pretty satisfied with the way this came out. There's also very little clearance here with the nut and the arm. The arm initially had a flange here to hold the long spring that went across here, but as you can see, I grinded it off using one of the stone wheels on my Dremel tool to make it nice and flat so that that flange wasn't hitting the bolt as it came across. And now it's ever slightly touching, but not enough that I'm worried about it being an actual problem performance-wise. I have the horn mounted here right above the fender. There was actually a hole that was already designated on the Fat MX assembly to hold the horn, but it works. Got the turn signals working. So taking off the steering and redoing the bearings and the cups and making sure that they were all aligned correctly in the front steering tube seemed to pay off. I finally got a chance to take this on a test ride after making that change, and the stability issue seems to have gone away. It's not quite as stable as the 2019 Monkey, but technology-wise and whatnot, I don't really expect it to be. There's really only two outstanding issues that I need to deal with. One is the mount for the rear tail lights. So there's actually a mount that is sold initially with the bike that, if you can find it online, costs potentially up to $200, and it's just a metal bracket, but particularly hard to come by apparently. So something I've been working on with the 3D printer is something that looks very similar to that bracket, but that obviously is a bit less expensive. So Still working on refining this, but the idea is that it can mount into the same holes that the original bracket would, and then have the 10 millimeter holes on each side for mounting the turn signals. So this is one of the prototype versions. Once I finish this up, the solution for the mounts, and again I'll put the design of this on Thingiverse when it's complete. And then the last issue I've been having, every time I go for a ride, if I ride more than a mile, it seems that this gas cap, and you just saw that there, gets over pressurized and creates some type of vacuum that doesn't let fuel come through the system. So actually this is a Honda gas cap. I'm not sure why that's creating that problem, or if there's some other venting solution that I need to figure out. But after those two things, this bike is pretty much complete. And actually, so I just took this gas cap off and I realized there was some crud stuck on this little hole here, which is probably the venting hole. So hopefully that was my problem. I don't know what it was. This is one of those new old stock caps. Not sure what could have gotten so crusty around that little hole. You can see there's actually something kind of stuck in it at the moment too. But there was just a big crusting that I flicked off, and assuming that was the venting hole to filter out of the top here, that might have solved my problem.